Hey, future real estate agents. Today I'm going to be covering Colorado closings and everything we need to know for when we're a real estate agent on closing day and what's going to be on the exam. But first, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone that's been posting positive comments on these videos. Seeing that watching these videos helped some of you pass the exam makes me so happy. And being a real estate agent is going to be all about putting yourself out there and building community. So keep commenting when your test is. Let's keep helping each other out. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit the like button. If these are helping you guys, I'm happy to keep making these videos. So thank you so much again. And without further ado, let's get started on what we need to know for Colorado closings on the real estate exam. All right, our first note card here. If the buyer finances the PMI, private mortgage insurance, into the loan, how does this affect the worksheet? So when I say worksheet, I'm talking about those closing documents. Whenever all these exam questions, if it says worksheet or sheet, it's referring to the closing worksheet. So if a buyer finances PMI into a loan, the amount of the loan would be increased. So sometimes these questions are more simple than we make them. If they're financing the PMI, it just means they're going to have a greater loan. Including the PMI in the loan means an additional amount borrowed, but there is still a charge to the buyer for the upfront PMI fee. Who is responsible for the figures on the closing statement on closing day? Who is responsible for those figures and making sure they're correct? The designated broker, So while the title company is responsible under the closing instructions agreement, the designated broker for each party is responsible for the correctness of the closing for the party. So you have to make sure those numbers are correct as a real estate agent. You have to make sure those numbers are correct. That's why we have to know all of this for the exam. If we didn't have to make sure those numbers were correct, if we didn't need to look through those closing statements, then we wouldn't have to know all this, but we do. So the designated broker. A release fee shown on a lender's new loan statement and paid by the lender is a. So this is asking on those worksheet or on the closing statements, you're going to have the debits and credits for the buyer, the broker, and the seller. So this is asking the release fee shown on a lender's new loan statement and paid by the lender is a entry to who? It's a single entry debit to the seller. So make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can get notified when I upload a debit versus credit video. I'm posting every Wednesday. I was gonna go into the debit versus credit and how you enter them, but it would take a long time. And I try and make these videos short and simple so it's easy to remember and easy to process. So I'm gonna make a video that goes further into that. So make sure you hit subscribe so you know when those debit versus credit, when that video comes out. But just remember, the release fee on a lender's new loan statement is a single entry debit to the seller. So that means the seller is paying for that. The good fund law allows at closing a cashier's check, a personal check, or cash. What does the good fund law allow at closing? Cashier's check, a personal check, or cash? It allows a cashier's check. Remember, good funds must be available immediately. So a cashier's check is the only one out of those three options that is available immediately. So there's bound to be a good funds question. We'll have a couple more coming up. What is considered good funds at closing? A personal check, a corporate check, or a teller's check? So what is considered good funds at closing? Is a personal check available immediately, a corporate check, or a teller's check? A teller's check. If you remember one thing about good funds, remember it's funds available right away. It equals to cash. Teller's check is the only one out of these. This does not, a personal check does not, corporate check does not. So good funds are funds available immediately. In a new loan closing, the net loan proceeds becomes a. In a new loan closing, the net loan proceeds becomes a debit to the broker only. So I'm going to go into a new loan closing and net loan proceeds real quick. So net loan proceeds explained. Net loan proceeds is the actual total of the loan, less deductions. So when you see the word less on the exam questions, less in accounting means minus or subtracting. So net loan proceeds are the total of the loans minus any deductions that the lender wired to the closing agent to be placed into the escrow account. So it's debited to the broker only because the lender wired those funds to the broker. RESPA says everything and all costs must show on the final closing statement. So I'm going to go into more details about RESPA in a few minutes too. But basically the closing statements are long with lots of numbers, bunch of debits and credits to this person, and this person. And that's because RESPA says that we have to do that. All of the costs have to be on there. So basically we have those long closing statements. So all of the credits and debits add up and we followed the RESPA rules and everyone is happy and the house is closed. Woohoo! So just remember, net loan proceeds is a debit to the broker only. What is the real property transfer declaration used for? What is the real property transfer declaration used for? To ensure fair and uniform property tax assessments. So just remember, declare that it's fair. The real property transfer declaration declares that tax assessments are fair. Are association reserve funds, which represent wear and tear during the seller's ownership, prorated at closing? So association reserve funds are set aside for wear and tear during the seller's ownerships. Are these prorated at closing? No, because wear and tear is a part of ownership. So the reserve funds are not prorated at closing. It's just like if you rent a place from someone, they cannot keep your security deposit for normal things that happen when you own something, with normal wear and tear. You cannot charge someone security deposit for that. It's the same thing. You cannot set those reserve funds aside and prorate them at closing. Reminder from me, awesome. Stay tuned until the end for a tip and trick on how to never miss a Colorado closing proration question on the exam. Every state has specific rules, so I am going to give you guys a nice tip and trick so you don't get that wrong on the exam for the Colorado closings for prorations. And I go more into depth in my real estate prorations in 3 simple steps video. Prorations equals math, which we all don't tend to love, but it's not complicated. So that link is below if you need help with prorations. Prorations is a part of closings. So would a title company or a brokerage firm check equal good funds? Would a title company or brokerage firm check equal good funds? So are either of these available immediately? No. So again, good funds must be equal to cash. So if you see a question about good funds on the exam, ask yourself, do they equal cash? Are they available immediately? And if the answer is no, then they are not good funds. What is Regulation Z? What is Regulation Z? So this is a federal regulation. This is going to be on the federal part as well. Regulation Z regulates the 4 advertising truths that lenders must follow. It protects borrowers. So I like to make acronyms for everything. The very first video that I made was all acronyms to help remember stuff. So my acronym for Regulation Z is BAMF, BAMF. Borrowing, how much am I borrowing? APR, what is the annual percent rate of my loan? Monthly payments, how many of them and how many am I making? And finance charges, things like origination fees. So those 4 things are the 4 advertising truths that lenders have to let you know. So Regulation Z protects the borrowers and they have to disclose these four things. How much am I borrowing? What is the annual percent rate? How many monthly payments will I have? And how many of them? And then finance charges, things like origination fees. And what is RESPA? What is RESPA? RESPA is the Real Estate Settlement and Procedures Act. It also protects borrowers from shady real estate business like kickbacks. So RESPA, literally protecting people on closing. It's the Real Estate Settlement and Procedures Act. What is TILA? What is TILA? TILA. Truth in Lending Act. So lenders have to tell the truth in all lending costs. So all of these different acts protect borrowers. The Truth in Lending Act, straightforward. It's lenders have to tell the truth for all of their lending costs. They must disclose all of that information. What is TRID? TRID. What is TRID? So this is basically the acronym of all the acronyms that we just covered. It's TILA-RESPA, Integrated Disclosures is literally what it stands for. TILA-RESPA, TILA-RESPA, Integrated Disclosures, and it's the know before you owe. It gives borrowers the opportunity to shop around for the best mortgage option for them. So they have to disclose all this information so you can shop around and figure out which mortgage is the best for you. So let's put those acronyms into practice. A completed closing statement and HUD-1 for a transaction that does not fall under the TRID rule must be provided at least 3 days prior to closing, 24 hours before closing, or at closing. So a completed closing statement and HUD-1 form for a transaction that does not fall under the TRID rule must be provided at least 3 days prior to closing, 24 hours before closing, or at closing. At closing. So here's an exam tip. Look for words like not in the question that try and trick you. So this said, that does not fall under the TRID rule. That is why it's at closing. Under TRID, there will be a new settlement statement called a closing disclosure, which must be issued to the borrower at least 3 days prior to closing. So if the question did not have this word in it, these 3 words that does not, the answer would have been at least 3 days prior to closing. However, it says that does not fall under the TRID rule. So if a closing statement that does not fall under the TRID rule, it's provided at closing. But if it does fall under the TRID rule, it must be provided at least 3 days prior to closing. So just make sure we're all looking out for those words like not. Because you see TRID, you see closing statement, you go, oh, I know that's at least 3 days prior to closing. And you're going through 80 questions, taking that exam, look for these words, trying to trick us. Joke's on them, because we know what to look for. Who pays for the recording of the warranty deed at closing? Who pays for the recording of the warranty deed at closing? The grantee or the buyer. The grantee or the buyer pays for the recording of the warranty deed at closing. Who pays for the owner's title insurance at closing? The seller pays for owner's title insurance at closing. Who pays for the preparation of the warranty deed at closing? Who pays for the preparation of the warranty deed at closing? The broker. So exam tip again, look for words like preparation versus recording in the questions, because that changes the answer. The Conway-Bogue decision, remember it said that brokers may not charge, they must advise legal counsel, and they have to use pre-printed approved forms. So remember that Conway-Bogue decision says that when it comes to preparing legal documents, brokers may not charge, must advise legal counsel, and use pre-printed commission approved forms to fill in the blanks. So this one said prepare. You cannot charge to prepare those documents. However, if we go back a couple questions, who pays for the recording? So that's the recording of the warranty deed. The grantee or the buyer pays for that. But as brokers, we cannot charge for the preparation of the warranty deed. So it'd be nice if they italicize the words on the exam, but they won't. So just get your brain, get your eyes ready to look for those specific words. So brokers cannot charge for that, so the broker pays. What is the Colorado documentary fee based on? What is the Colorado documentary fee based on? 1 cent for every $100 of the sales price, also written as 0.01 per $100 or 0.0001 times the selling price. So I've seen all three of these options on the exam prep questions. So make sure you recognize all three of these. They could write it any way. So don't just remember 1 cent for every $100, because on the exam it may have 0.0001 times the selling price as an option. All three of these are correct. That is what they base the Colorado documentary fee on. Couple more left here. If you're an out-of-state seller, what percent of the sale must the closing entity collect? So if you're an out-of-state seller, what percent of the sale must the closing entity collect? Non-residents of Colorado are subject to a 2% withholding tax if the sale is more than $100,000. So 2% withholding tax, and that only applies if the sale is more than $100,000 and they're a non-resident. All right, prorations. So in Colorado, what type of calendar do we use to calculate prorations at closing? So if you see a proration question and you're getting ready to add up those days and those 3 simple steps to calculate prorations, how do you know how many days to add up for the year and for the months? We use the Gregorian calendar. So that's a 365 days a year calendar, and we have to know the number of days in the months. That's super simple as well. Just remember, April, June, September, November are the only months with 31 days versus 30. Wait, I mixed those up. April, June, September, and November. Those are the only months with 30 days. So ignore that, with 30 days versus 31. The rest of the months have 31 except for February. So we have to know that it's 365 days a year, and depending on when the closing is, we'll have to know which days are 30 versus 31. April, June, September, and November are the only months with 30 versus 31 days. And then of course there's the short month, which is February, 28 days. And then remember, SON, son, seller owns national. So it's like, obviously, why can't they just keep it the same in every state, federal versus state, national versus state? But it's not the same. So look out for what they tell you to do on the test. Hopefully they'll tell you exactly which calendar to use. But remember, for the Colorado state exam, we use the 365-day-a-year calendar, and seller owns national. So that means the seller is going to pay for closing day on the national exam. Buyer is going to pay on the for closing day on the Colorado state exam. So obviously there's a lot to this. I go much more in depth in the proration video. So if prorations confuse you, they're super simple. Just go check out that video and just know seller owns national. They use the 360-day calendar and the seller pays for closing. And then here in Colorado, we use a 365-day calendar and the buyer pays for closing day in Colorado. All right, that is it for Colorado closings. I hope this helped you guys in your studying for that part. Remember, when you're taking your practice exams, read the questions slow and look for those words that are trying to trip you up. Review these videos a few times if you need to so it really sinks in. And most importantly, just keep it up. Every day you're getting a little bit closer to selling a home. I'd love to build this community of future new up-and-coming real estate agents. So comment below where you are in this process, and please let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.